Step two is growing your brand. So establishing exactly what your hook is and then growing that to the point of if it's a product you're going to release or it's a business, successful business you're running, or if you're wanting to grow your own brand in terms of if you're a good writer or you want to become a commentator on television or you want to become...
Right.
So there's so many different avenues to do that, but I think growing the brand these days is a lot easier.
Right.
But these days with looking on social networking sites, Twitter, YouTube, that anyone can create their own presence, especially online.
Got it.
And so growing that brand is very, very important.
So essentially, in other words, if step one is identifying the backstory and really, what your brand represents and what it doesn't represent, right?
Yeah.
So then the second step would be growing it. So that would really be developing the actual strategy, the rollout strategy to go to, which media first, identifying key organizations or, do you want to try to go for TV, for radio, for magazines?
Yeah, and I think it's identifying exactly what industry that if you've got a financial product and you want to generate some publicity and you're about to make a major launch, well, you're not going to go to the sports pages.
Right.
That you want to make sure that you identify and target key media to start with. And that's probably what we did with you when just going back on when you first came to Australia, that the main thing that I saw online, these negative stories about you, is they're all repetitive from one or two bad stories written a long time ago. And I'd see trends in terms of lazy journalists going back and writing new stories, but using old material. So the most important thing that I did when you were coming to Australia and what we're doing around the world in South Africa and other places is putting you in front of them and you speaking to them personally and not just sending them material that they can write a story with, because putting you in front of people, always closes the deal.
Well, okay. Let's get back to that in a second, but that's a crucial distinction. In other words, don't essentially just send a press packet out to a journalist and let them decide, what's relevant and what's not. A, because some might be lazy and just, find something and just go with whatever's out there. And B, you lose that personal connection where you can.
They can sometimes feel used of saying, listen, I've got a product or I want something to be promoted, and I'm sending you a press pack which I'm sending to all the other press as well. But I think that personal approach, so not sending blanket emails to journalists, identifying who your target journalists are, the target media, and approaching them personally.
Okay, so now this is a great point here, and I don't want to get waylaid here, but this is super critical because I just got an email from you. I was CC'd on a letter you wrote to some journalists in South Africa, and you did that very thing. You actually practiced what you preach. So rather than going out and just announcing that I'm coming to South Africa, you identified a few key journalists that you wanted to do business. You thought were the right journalists for my story, and you sent them almost private invitations that before we disseminate this out to the general media, you made it exclusive. Yeah. So now all of a sudden that creates sort of a kind of scoop mentality, right? So the journal, I saw the response you got back was like, oh my God, we'd love to. And it was, so I get, so almost the framing of it all, how you essentially identify who's going to be best suited to write about your story and then go after them first and not just go out to like 500 people at once, right?
Correct. And the thing is with that as well, that you need to make sure that the journalist who we're talking about in South Africa at the moment is a very well-known
respected
writer.
Right.
Yeah. So the main thing is going to them and giving them respect of exactly who they are and not putting them in the same group as the general media in that specific market.
Okay.
But identifying them and respecting them, that they have a certain standing in the media world.
Got it.
And giving them the scoop, giving them the first bite of the cherry.
Okay, good. So step one is identify the backstory, identify your brand.
Yep.
The hook. Step two would be to grow your brand, develop a strategy of which media you want to tackle first, and also which people within any particular media group you want to tackle first, right? And try to have some exclusivity, some scarcity attached to that, where it's not going to be some blanket to everybody and their grandma, right? Yeah. And then step three would be what?
Protecting your brand.
Ah, okay. Protecting the brand. Yeah. Meaning?
Well, if you've done all this hard work, if you've got, most people, if they're launching a product, they're launching a company, or they're launching themselves, where they're doing a book launch or a film launch and everything else, that they've obviously invested a lot of money into that up until that stage. So you need to make sure that then when you do launch and you're generating publicity around it, you want to make sure, A, it's positive publicity, B, that it's going to help your brand, and once you've established that, to make sure then that you continue on that line and you make sure that all that work you've done up until then is then reflects in terms of success of your brand and your business.
Got it. Okay, so when you talk about then just overall protecting the brand means that, you know, once you're out there and you're established, essentially not to just rest on your laurels
Never.
and you know, pretend, hey, the message is out there and it's going to keep spinning in the right direction without me. You have to essentially pay constant attention.
Always manage it. And continually look for other opportunities. When looking at media, I mean, people always look for the mainstream press of major newspapers, major television shows, major radio shows. They're good to get, but on the flip side, there's more local press. So identifying not just the high-end levels of media, but all levels of media. And especially these days as well with online, there's so many different great online marketing websites. There's great financial websites. It's all media. So your small local newspapers as well, community radio, websites that you can go and blog on. So there's
so many different media out there. Basically, I guess the question I have here, and I want to go back and take things in order, starting from step one again, and just expand on each step. And I want to lay this out in a way that anybody can sort of like I want to create a template that people could just kind of plop their own business into and use the tools that you're going to reveal to everybody and just kind of spring into action and, you know, get their PR campaigns off and running in a positive direction. Before I go backwards, I just want to just ask you a question, something that's been kind of on my mind as you're talking. It occurred to me that in some ways, you know, how you would start generating your PR from scratch is really no different than anything else you do when you grow a new business. In other words, it's like a business into itself.
It is.
Right? So if I was going to go out, let's say, and I don't know anything about being in the fruit business, like, you know, apples, oranges, pears, and open up a fruit stand, right? Before I went out and bought a beautiful fruit stand and paid high rent in the corner of the busiest street in the world, right? And bought massive quantities of inventory and had the perfect fruit store, right? Before I did that, I probably want to dabble first and start off a bit smaller, maybe in the more localized areas, and maybe learn how to do something really, really well in a smaller, more controllable environment. So would it make sense, now extrapolating that into PR, would it make sense then if you were like a newbie who doesn't really have, like, you know, some wild, insane backstory, but you have great value and you have a hook that is as good as it can be? So it's, you know, we'll get to that in a second, what that means. But would you want to start off more in the local markets, in the sort of easy to procure stuff, like your local newspaper, the local radio station, and then sort of get a couple of pieces of PR under your belt, and then take those and then leverage that, and then go to a slightly bigger one and almost make it like a snowball effect? But is that what you would do?
Well, I don't think you have a choice. If you're not a big name and you're going to mainstream press, well, they're going to ask who you are for starters and probably why you're calling them. So in terms of establishing yourself, in terms of airtime, more opportunity at the lower level in terms of local press is probably a good way. But also online, there's some great websites for specific industries online. So if you're trying to build your own profile in a certain sector,
right,
becoming a guest blogger on, you know, certain websites. And there's so many different media outlets these days that everyone's, you know, newspapers are trying to find a way of charging people for getting online. So they're crying out for people to, opportunities for people, experts in their field, to write columns. And not always they'll pay you for it, but if you can start generating, so you click on Google and there's 45 articles in the past year,
right.
Well, all of a sudden you then have a presence.
Okay, now let's go back to the beginning. Okay, let's start off with identifying the hook. And when I say the hook, I just want to be clear here to everyone who's watching this, is that you know, Nick is the most ethical guy that I've ever met in my life. He really is, and his dad just won the Order of Australia, which is, I mean, it's almost like being knighted in Australia. So just to give you an idea of the family that is behind the Fordham Agency, Nick's brother Ben is 33 years old, already perhaps the most respected journalist.
Or one of.
Well, his age has to be the most. He's 33. He's on 60 Minutes. He's on Today Tonight. I mean, he's like in current affairs. Unbelievable guy. So that's the sort of family, that's the ethics behind all this. And the reason I say this is because the word hook almost might have a negative connotation.